Most men chase wealth and lose themselves in the process. They climb, they claw, they compromise every principle they once held sacred. And when they finally reach the summit, they look in the mirror and see a stranger, a hollowed-out version of who they were, wearing expensive clothes but carrying an empty soul. Seneca understood this paradox 2,000 years ago. He was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, advisor to emperors, a philosopher who walked among kings. And yet, he wrote more about the dangers of wealth than its acquisition, not because he feared money, but because he understood something most people never will. Wealth without wisdom is just a more expensive form of slavery. So let me be clear from the start. This is not about rejecting money. This is not some ascetic fantasy where you abandon the material world and meditate in a cave. This is about something far more dangerous: building wealth without becoming its prisoner. Acquiring power without being consumed by it, playing the game without letting the game play you. This is Seneca's code. The Stoic path to riches that doesn't cost you your soul. Rule 1. Master desire before you master markets. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Read that again. Poverty isn't a bank account number. It's a state of mind. It's the endless hunger that can never be satisfied, the void that grows larger with every acquisition. Most people don't understand this. They think getting rich will solve their inner chaos. They believe that once they hit that number, once they buy that house, once they achieve that status, the restlessness will end. It never does. Because they're trying to fill an internal void with external things. It's like trying to quench thirst by looking at pictures of water. The wealthy are surrounded by luxury and still feel empty. The Stoic is surrounded by nothing and feels complete. That's the difference. Not what you have, but what you need. Not what you own, but what owns you. Here's the brutal truth. If you can't be content with less, you'll never be satisfied with more. The man who needs a mansion to feel secure will need a palace once he gets the mansion. The man who needs 1 million to feel successful will need 10 million once he gets the first. The finish line keeps moving because the race was never external to begin with. Seneca lived this. He had wealth beyond measure, and he could lose it all tomorrow and still be the same man. Because his identity wasn't wrapped up in his possessions. His power wasn't derived from his status. He understood that true wealth is wanting what you already have. Everything beyond that is just decoration. So before you chase the next dollar, ask yourself, am I building wealth, or am I feeding a void? Am I creating freedom or just more sophisticated chains? Because if you can't answer that question honestly, you're not on the path to riches. You're on the path to becoming rich and miserable, which might be worse than being poor. Master your desires, then master the markets. In that order, always. Rule 2. Wealth is time bought back, not things accumulated. Life is long if you know how to use it, Seneca said. But most people burn their entire existence trading time for money, then money for things, then wonder why they feel bankrupt despite their bank account. The Stoic doesn't accumulate possessions. He purchases freedom. There's a fundamental difference. One is addition. The other is subtraction. One weighs you down. The other sets you free. Every dollar you earn should answer one question. Does this buy me back my time, or does it steal more of it? That luxury car that has premium maintenance and stresses you out every time someone parks near it. That's not wealth. That's a liability disguised as success. That massive house that takes your weekends to maintain and fills you with anxiety about mortgage payments. That's not freedom. That's a prison with better decor. Real wealth is waking up and having sovereignty over your day. It's being able to say no to opportunities that don't align with your values. It's having enough that you never have to compromise your principles for a paycheck. It's buying back the hours that the market would otherwise own. Seneca was clear about this. Time is the only asset that matters. Money is just a tool to protect it, expand it, and ensure you're spending it on what actually matters. The wealthy man who works 80 hours a week to maintain his wealth is not wealthy. He's just a well-compensated slave. Think about it. What's the point of having $1 million if you're too stressed, too exhausted, too trapped by your own empire to enjoy a single moment of it? What's the point of building something massive if it requires your constant presence to keep it alive? That's not an asset. That's a dependent. The Stoic builds wealth that generates time, passive income, systems that run without constant supervision, investments that grow while he sleeps, not so he can be lazy, but so he can be free, free to think, free to create, free to spend time with people who matter, free to walk away from anything that insults his soul. So measure your wealth differently. Stop counting dollars and start counting hours. How many hours of your life do you own? How many hours are you renting out to someone else's dream? The answer to that question tells you how rich you really are. Rule 3. Fortune favors preparation, not hope. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, Seneca wrote. But here's what he didn't say out loud, because it was obvious to him. Most people are completely unprepared for the opportunities that could change their lives. They wait for their big break. They hope for the perfect moment. They pray that someone will notice them, choose them, elevate them. And while they're waiting, they're not sharpening their skills. They're not building relationships. They're not studying the game. They're just hoping the game will change to favor them. Hope is not a strategy. Hope is what people cling to when they've refused to prepare. The Stoic doesn't hope for fortune. He positions himself so that when fortune arrives, he's the only one ready to receive it. Think about the entrepreneurs who built empires during crises. Did they get lucky? Or were they the ones who had been preparing, studying, positioning, building skills and networks and capital while everyone else was comfortable? When the opportunity came, when the market shifted, when the door opened for a split second, they were the only ones ready to walk through it. That's not luck. That's the intersection of readiness and circumstance. And you can control one of those variables completely. Seneca spent years studying philosophy, rhetoric, law, and human nature. Not because he knew he'd become the advisor to the emperor, but because he was preparing for a life of significance, whatever form it took. And when Nero chose him, he was ready, not lucky, ready. So stop waiting for your moment and start building toward it. What skills are you developing? What relationships are you nurturing? What knowledge acquiring? What weaknesses are you eliminating? Because when your opportunity comes, and it will come if you're paying attention, the only question that matters is, are you ready? Fortune doesn't favor the hopeful. It favors the prepared. Rule 4. The illusion of security costs more than risk. He who is brave is free, Seneca said, and nothing requires more bravery than letting go of the illusion of security to pursue actual freedom. Most people trade their entire lives for the promise of stability. A steady paycheck, a predictable routine, a guaranteed pension. And they tell themselves this is wisdom, this is responsible, this is safe. It's not. It's the most dangerous gamble you can make, because you're betting your entire existence on someone else's system. You're trusting that your employer will keep you, that the economy won't shift, that your industry won't collapse, that your health will hold, that nothing will change, and everything changes. The person who spent 40 years being secure in a corporate job and then gets laid off at 55 with no transferable skills, no network outside the company, no ability to pivot, that person wasn't secure. They were just slowly walking toward a cliff while calling it a path. Real security doesn't come from guarantees. It comes from capability. From knowing that no matter what happens, you have the skills, the adaptability, the resilience, and the resources to handle it. That's what Seneca meant by fortune. Not chance, but the ability to navigate whatever comes. The Stoic takes calculated risks, not reckless gambles, but strategic moves that trade false security for real optionality. Because the person with one source of income is vulnerable. The person with 5 is resilient. The person who can only do one thing is fragile. The person who can do 10 is anti-fragile. Seneca understood this deeply. He didn't rely on the emperor's favor, even though he had it. He built his own wealth. He developed his own philosophy. He created his own independence. So when everything collapsed, when Nero turned on him, when he was forced into exile and eventually into death, he faced it with dignity because his security was internal, not external. So ask yourself, what are you pretending is secure that's actually just comfortable? What illusion are you maintaining because questioning it would require courage you're not sure you have? What leap are you avoiding because you've convinced yourself the cage you're in is actually a home? Security is the slowest form of suicide. Freedom is the bravest form of life. Rule 5. Your character is your only permanent asset. Here's what Seneca knew that modern wealth gurus will never tell you. You can lose your money. You can lose your reputation. You can lose your business, your status, your connections, everything. But you cannot lose who you are unless you give that away voluntarily. Your character is the only asset that's truly yours. Everything else is borrowed, leased, subject to the whims of fortune and the judgment of others. But who you are when no one's watching, that's permanent. That's compound interest on a soul level. Most people build their wealth on sand. They lie, they cheat, they cut corners. They compromise their values for short-term gains, and it works, for a while. But then the foundation shifts. A scandal breaks. A partner betrays them. A deal falls apart. And they realize too late that they built an empire on quicksand. The Stoic builds on bedrock. Integrity isn't a strategy. It's a filter. It's a decision to only pursue wealth through means that don't erode who you are. Because what's the point of becoming rich if you have to become someone you despise to get there? Seneca was tested on this constantly. He advised a tyrant. He had opportunities to enrich himself through corruption, through betrayal, through all the standard political games. And sometimes he played them. He wasn't perfect. He was human. But his philosophy was clear. If you sacrifice your character for wealth, you've made the worst trade imaginable. You've sold your soul for trinkets. Modern culture laughs at this. Nice guys finish last, they say. Ethics are expensive, they joke. But here's the thing they don't understand. Unethical behavior might get you to the top faster, but it guarantees you won't stay there, because people don't trust the opportunist. They don't follow the liar. They don't invest in the fraud. Trust is currency. Reputation is leverage. Character is the foundation of both, and you can't fake any of them forever. So here's the Stoic standard. Every decision you make in pursuit of wealth should pass one test. Can you look at yourself in the mirror tomorrow and respect what you see? If the answer is no, if the deal requires you to become someone you wouldn't want to know, walk away. Not because you're moral, because you're strategic. Because long-term wealth requires long-term trust. And long-term trust requires integrity. Your character is your only permanent asset. Invest in it accordingly. Rule 6. The wealthy man serves no master. Seneca wrote, "Slavery resides under marble and gold." He was talking about the rich who think they're free, but are actually the most enslaved people in society. Enslaved to their image. Enslaved to their possessions. enslaved to the expectations of others. True wealth is not having more, it's needing less. It's reaching a point where you serve no master, human or material, where your decisions are yours, where your time is yours, where you can walk away from anything that doesn't align with who you are. Most rich people can't do this. They're trapped. Trapped by their lifestyle, trapped by their reputation, trapped by their need for validation. They've built a life that requires constant feeding, constant maintenance, constant performance. They're not wealthy. They're just well-compensated performers in someone else's show. The Stoic builds freedom, not status. He accumulates enough that he never has to compromise, enough that he can say no without consequence, enough that he can pursue what matters without needing permission. This is why Seneca advocated for simplicity alongside wealth. Not poverty. Simplicity. The ability to live comfortably on far less than you have. Because that gap between what you can afford and what you need, that's freedom. That's power. That's the buffer that lets you make decisions based on principle instead of pressure. Think about it. The person who needs 100,000 a year to survive is a slave to any job that pays that. The person who can live comfortably on 30,000 a year but earns 100, that person is free. Free to walk, free to experiment, free to take risks, free to say no to anything that compromises their values. This is the Stoic paradox. The less you need, the more you have. The less you're attached to, the more power you possess. The fewer masters you serve, the wealthier you truly are. So build your wealth with one goal: sovereignty. Not to impress, not to accumulate, not to keep up with others. To serve no one, to need no one, to be free in the truest, deepest, most radical sense of the word. The wealthy man serves no master. That's the code. Rule 7. Death is the great equalizer. Build accordingly. You could leave life right now, Seneca wrote. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This is not morbid. This is clarity. This is the most powerful wealth-building framework you'll ever encounter. Because here's the truth. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Everyone reading this is going to die. And all the money you accumulate, all the status you achieve, all the possessions you hoard, none of it comes with you. Zero. You arrive naked and you leave naked. So why are you building like you're going to live forever? Why are you sacrificing your present for a future that isn't guaranteed? Why are you destroying your relationships, your health, your peace of mind in pursuit of numbers in an account that you'll never actually get to enjoy? The awareness of death is not depressing. It's liberating, because it forces you to ask the only question that matters. If I died tomorrow, would I be proud of how I spent today? Most people can't answer yes. They're working on things they don't care about, for people they don't respect, toward goals they don't even want. They're on autopilot, chasing someone else's definition of success, terrified to stop and ask if any of it actually matters. The Stoic uses death as a filter. Every opportunity, every investment, every decision gets measured against one standard. Does this make my life more meaningful? Or am I just filling time until I die? Seneca was obsessed with this. He practiced voluntary poverty regularly. He'd spend weeks living as if he'd lost everything, eating simple food, sleeping on the floor, wearing plain clothes, not as punishment, but as preparation, to remind himself that death could take everything at any moment, and that if it did, if he lost all his wealth tomorrow, he'd still be whole, still be free, still be himself. This is not about being pessimistic. This is about being real, about building wealth that serves life, not the other way around, about ensuring that when the end comes, and it will come, you don't look back with regret. You don't wish you'd worked less, accumulated less, stressed less, You look back and think, I spent my time well. I built something meaningful. I became someone I respected. That's the ultimate wealth. Not what you own when you die, but who you became while you lived. Rule 8. Generosity is the highest form of wealth. Seneca understood something that modern capitalism has forgotten. Wealth that doesn't flow dies. Wealth that doesn't serve others rots. The richest man is not the one who has the most, but the one who gives the most and still has plenty. This is not charity in the traditional sense. This is not guilt-driven giving or performative generosity. This is strategic, because the people who understand power understand that the ability to give without expectation is the greatest flex of all. It says, I have so much that I can afford to let it go. I'm so secure that I don't need to hoard. I'm so wealthy that I can enrich others without diminishing myself. Seneca gave constantly. He supported young philosophers. He helped friends in exile. He used his wealth to create opportunities for others, not because he was soft, but because he understood leverage. Generosity creates loyalty. It builds networks. It establishes legacy. The person who gives nothing keeps nothing in the end. But here's the deeper truth. Generosity is how you know you've won the game. If you can't give freely, you're not wealthy. You're just afraid. Afraid of loss. Afraid of scarcity. Afraid that if you let any of it go, you'll slip back into the nothing you started from. The Stoic gives from abundance, not fear. He gives because he knows more will come, because he understands that value flows toward those who create value for others, because he's built a system that generates more than he needs, and the overflow? That's not excess, that's impact. Think about the wealthiest people in history. Not just rich, wealthy. The Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the modern-day philanthropists who've built libraries, funded research, created foundations that will outlive them by centuries. They understood that money is just a tool. The real game is what you do with it. The real legacy is what you build for others. So here's the Stoic standard. If you can't afford to be generous, you're not wealthy enough yet. And when you can afford it, when you've built enough that giving doesn't hurt, that's when you start. Not with everything, but with something. Regularly, strategically, with intention. Because generosity is the highest form of wealth. It's proof that you've transcended scarcity. It's evidence that you've won. Rule 9. The crowd is always wrong about what matters. Seneca observed, if you wish to be loved, be lovable. But he also knew that the crowd's love is fickle, worthless, and often a sign you're doing something wrong. The masses celebrate mediocrity and attack excellence. They worship comfort and fear discomfort. They choose the easy lie over the hard truth every single time. So if you're building wealth based on what the crowd thinks, you've already lost. Because the crowd doesn't know what it wants, it doesn't understand value. It chases trends, not principle. It rewards performance, not substance. The Stoic builds in opposition to the crowd, not to be contrarian for the sake of it, but because the crowd is a lagging indicator. By the time everyone knows about an opportunity, it's already over. By the time everyone agrees on a truth, it's already priced in. The real opportunities exist in the spaces the crowd is too afraid, too comfortable, or too ignorant to explore. Seneca lived this. He pursued philosophy when everyone else was pursuing politics. He wrote about virtue when everyone else was chasing pleasure. He advocated for simplicity when everyone else was accumulating. And because of that, he stood out. He became immortal. Not because he followed the crowd, but because he ignored it. Think about every major fortune in history. Were they built by doing what everyone else was doing? No. They were built by seeing what everyone else was missing, by zigging when everyone else zagged, by being willing to look foolish, to be misunderstood, to stand alone. The crowd mocks until you succeed. Then it pretends it always believed in you. The crowd laughs until you win. Then it studies your methods. The crowd resists until you dominate. Then it rewrites history to make you seem inevitable. So stop optimizing for their approval. Stop building for their applause. Stop measuring your worth by their standards. Build for yourself. Build for the few who understand. Build for the future that hasn't arrived yet. Because the crowd is always wrong about what matters. And if you're doing it right, they won't understand until it's too late. Rule 10. You cannot lose what you never needed. Here's the final truth. The ultimate Stoic wealth principle. The thing that Seneca returned to again and again in his writing. You cannot lose what you never needed in the first place. Most people spend their lives in fear. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of poverty. And that fear drives them to accumulate, to hoard, to cling to everything they have as if letting go would destroy them. But the Stoic knows better. He knows that the things you think you need, most of them you don't. The lifestyle you think you require, you could live without it. The status you think defines you, it's an illusion. The possessions you think complete you, they're just objects. Seneca proved this. He had immense wealth and gave much of it away. He had immense power and walked away from it. He had a life of luxury and practiced poverty voluntarily. Why? To remind himself that none of it was essential, that he could lose it all tomorrow and still be whole. This is the ultimate freedom. Knowing that you could lose everything material and still be yourself, still be capable, still be content. Because your wealth isn't in your bank account, it's in your character, your skills, your relationships, your mindset. The person who needs nothing is richer than the person who has everything and fears losing it. Because fear of loss is poverty, no matter how much you have. And contentment is wealth, no matter how little you own. So build your wealth, yes. Pursue success, absolutely. But do it from a place of sufficiency, not scarcity. From abundance, not desperation. Build because you want to create, not because you need to prove something. Accumulate because you can deploy it strategically, not because you're terrified of not having enough. You cannot lose what you never needed. And once you internalize that, once you truly understand it, you're already wealthier than most people will ever be. So here it is. Seneca's Code, the Stoic path to wealth without losing your soul. Master desire. Buy back time. Prepare for fortune. Reject false security. Build your character. Serve no master. Remember death. Give freely. Ignore the crowd. Need nothing. These aren't just principles. They're a filter, a way to navigate a world that will constantly try to sell you a version of success that costs everything and delivers nothing. A way to build wealth that doesn't hollow you out. A way to win without losing yourself. Because at the end of your life, when you're lying there taking your final breath, no one's going to ask how much money you made. They're going to ask who you were, what you stood for, how you treated people, what you built that mattered. And if you followed Seneca's code, if you built wealth without losing your soul, you'll have an answer worth giving. The Stoic doesn't chase riches. He builds freedom, and freedom, true freedom, is the only wealth that lasts.